You cannot learn what a family is from a drawing room. In a drawing room, everybody is performing. The daughters have been coached, the father has counted the silver, and the tea has been laid out by servants who have been threatened into invisibility. A man who chooses a wife out of a drawing room is choosing a portrait somebody else painted. So when the Duke of Marchford was told he had to select one of Sir Ambrose Kytely's 3 daughters before Michaelmas, he did not send his card. He sent 4 horses ahead of him with a groom named Reeve. And then he rode into that stable yard at dusk in a wet coat, with mud to the knee, and let a head groom he had never met call him boy. He stayed 7 days. He watched all 3 of them. 2 of them never once looked at his face. The article that owned his life was 2 pages long, and it had been signed when he was 19 years old, in a room he was not invited into. Edward Gaunt had been a cornet of dragoons at the time, in Portugal, with mud in his boots and no expectation of ever inheriting anything, because he had an elder brother in excellent health and a father who was expected to live to 80. His father lived to 54, his brother lived to 28. And when the 6th Duke of Marchford died in the spring of 1815, 3 weeks before Waterloo, he left his surviving son a dukedom, 11,000 acres, 4 houses he could not afford to heat, and a marriage article binding the estate to Sir Ambrose Kytely of Thornfield in the county of Suffolk. The terms were simple, and they were merciless. In 1809, the 6th Duke had borrowed £60,000 from Ambrose Kytely, who was not then a knight and was very much not a gentleman, being the son of a whopping rope-maker who had gone out to Bengal at 17 and come back at 40 with a fortune nobody looked at too closely. Kytely had not wanted interest. Kytely had wanted in. So the article provided that the sum should stand unrepaid, and that in consideration thereof, the heir to the Dukedom of Marchford should marry a daughter of Ambrose Kytely, the choice of daughter to rest with the heir, the marriage to be solemnized before the feast of St. Michael in the year 1816. And if it were not, the £60,000 fell due in full within 90 days. Ned Gaunt had read it for the first time in a solicitor's office in Lincoln's Inn, sitting down, 11 days after his father's funeral. He had read it twice. He had then asked one question: "Is there any part of this instrument which requires my consent?" "Your father consented on your behalf, your grace. You were a minor at the date of execution." "I was 19. I was at Almeida." "Yes, your grace." Ned had sat in that chair for a long time. He was not a romantic man. He had been in the cavalry for 11 years, and he had watched a great deal of the romance go out of everything. He understood perfectly well that men of his rank married for land and money, and had done for 600 years, and that his own grandmother had met his grandfather 9 days before the wedding. What he could not get past was the choice of daughter. That was the phrase that stuck in him like a splinter. The choice of daughter to rest with the heir. His father had sold him and had thought himself generous, because he had left the boy a choice among the goods. He had 16 months. He spent 14 of them trying and failing to raise £60,000, and by August of 1816 he had accepted the thing, and had written to Sir Ambrose Kytely to say that he would come to Thornfield on the 12th of September to pay his respects to the family. Then he sat in his study at Marchford for 2 hours with the letter sealed on the desk in front of him, and thought about the drawing room he was going to be shown into, and the 3 young women who would be arranged in it, and the fact that he was expected to pick one of them out like a man buying a horse at Tattersall's, on an hour's acquaintance, for the rest of both their lives. And a second idea came to him, a bad idea, a very bad idea, of exactly the kind that had made him rather a good cavalry officer and an extremely difficult subordinate. He rang for his valet. "Coin, can you ride?" "After a fashion, your grace." "How do you feel about a fortnight in a Suffolk inn under a false name?" Coin, who had been 11 years in the peninsula with him and had long ago stopped being surprised, said, "Will I be required to lie to magistrates, your grace, or only to gentry?" "Only gentry." "Then I shall enjoy it very much." The letter that went to Thornfield the following morning said that his grace the Duke of Marchford would arrive on the 12th of September, and that he begged leave to send 4 of his horses on ahead a week early with a groom, in order that the animals might be rested and fit before his own arrival, and that he trusted Sir Ambrose's stables could accommodate them. Sir Ambrose Kytely wrote back within 2 days that they could accommodate 40. The groom's name was Jack Reeve. Reeve had been his mother's name before she married. Jack was what his brother had called him from the age of 4, for reasons nobody in the family had ever been able to explain, and which had died with his brother. He rode into the yard at Thornfield at 7 in the evening on the 5th of September in weather that had been coming down for 6 hours. Thornfield was new money and looked it, and not in a bad way. The house was a great pale block built 40 years earlier, all glass and pediment, but the stables behind it were the best Ned had seen outside a racing establishment. 40 loose boxes, brick paved, drained properly, with a clock tower and a covered washdown. Whatever else Ambrose Kytely was, he had spent his money on the right things, and he had spent it well. The head groom came out under the arch with a lantern. He was about 60, bandy, and had the eyes of a man who had been looking at horses for 50 years and at people for rather less. "You'll be Marchford's man." "Reeve," Ned said. "4 of them? 2 bays, the chestnut, and the gray mare. The gray's offhind is filled a little. She'll want walking out in the morning." Bartle held up the lantern and looked at the 4 horses instead of at the man who had brought them, which told Ned everything he needed to know about him, and which he approved of entirely. Then Bartle looked at him. "You've come a long way in that." "Since Wednesday." "You'll want your supper? Loft over the far end. 3rd bed's empty. Tell Mrs. Date at the kitchen door I said you was to have hot." Bartle took the gray's rein. "And boy, don't come in the front of the house nor go past the yew walk. Sir Ambrose don't like the stable in his gardens." "No," said the Duke of Marchford. "Very good." He slept that night in a loft over a stable on a straw mattress, between a lad of 15 who snored and a man of 40 who talked in his sleep about a woman named Alice, and he lay awake for an hour listening to rain on the tiles and 40 horses shifting underneath him, and thought that he had not been this comfortable since Spain. He met 2 of the Kytely sisters on the first morning. He was walking the gray mare out on a long rein in the menage at 8:30 when they came down from the house. He heard them before he saw them, which was instructive, because they were arguing, and they stopped arguing 11 feet before they came round the corner, and by the time they were visible, they were laughing. Cassandra Kytely was 25, and she was, quite simply, the handsomest woman Ned had seen in 3 years, tall, black-haired, magnificent, with a color in her face that came from real health and real riding. She was in a habit of dark green that had cost 40 guineas, and she wore it like a uniform. Louisa Kytely was 21, smaller, fairer, prettier in the way that goes off, and had the sweetest voice he had ever heard, and used it constantly. "There," said Cassandra, "the gray. Bartle said there was a gray." She walked straight up to the mare, took her jaw in one hand and turned her head, and looked at her teeth with a competence Ned respected. "6, she said. "7, madam," said Ned. Cassandra Kytely did not look round. She had not looked at him once. He was a voice attached to a rein. "She's short in the back. Is she fast?" "She stays." "Have her ready at 10. I shall try her." "She's traveled 4 days, madam, and she's filled behind. I'd not put her out today." Cassandra turned round then. It was the first time. She looked at him for perhaps a second and a half, and what was in her face was not anger. It was a kind of blankness, the entirely untroubled blankness of a woman who has heard a chair express an opinion. 10 o'clock, she said, and walked away. Louisa lingered. You mustn't mind my sister, she said, with her head on one side in that lovely voice. She is a great deal fiercer than she means to be. What is your name? Reeve, Miss. Reeve, how nice. And you have come all the way from Marchford. You must tell me, is it very grand? I have heard the long gallery is 140 feet. 131, Miss. 131? She said it to herself, softly, the way a woman files something. And his grace, is he very terrible? They say he was a soldier and that he never smiles, and that he has a scar all down one side of his face. He has no scar, miss. Oh, genuine disappointment. How dull of him. And she smiled at him, sweetly, kindly, warmly, and then, as she turned away, she said, without any change of tone at all, to the stable boy Dickon, who was carrying 2 buckets past her, Not across the gravel, you disgusting child. You have splashed my hymn, and struck him hard across the back of the head with the flat of her hand. Dickon was 11. He did not put the buckets down. He said, sorry, miss, and kept walking, and water went down his leg into his boot, and Louisa Kytely went up to the house in the sunshine humming. Ned stood in the menage holding a gray mare on a long rein. He had been at Thornfield for 14 hours. Cassandra rode the mare at 10. She rode her for 2 hours, and she rode her extremely well, and she brought her back with her flanks heaving and salt dried white on her shoulders, and she dropped the reins into Ned's hand from the mounting block and said nothing whatsoever, and went in to her luncheon. He walked the mare for 40 minutes, and then stood in the box with her and did her legs with cold water for another 20, and he was still there at 1 o'clock when a shadow came across the door. She's blown. Ned looked up. The third sister was standing in the doorway with a stone jar in her hands. He had not seen her before. He had assumed there were 2. She was 23, of middle height, and there was nothing about her that would have made a man look up in a room. Her hair was an ordinary brown, put up without any attempt at anything. Her face was narrow and quiet, and her dress was a plain blue print that had been washed 100 times, and she had a smear of something green on her cuff, and she was not pretty, and she was not plain, and she was simply entirely ordinary. And Ned Gaunt had spent 11 years learning that ordinary is the most common disguise on earth. She's warm, miss, he said, not blown. She is blown. Cassandra took her along the top of the ridge, and there is no going slowly along the ridge. It is the only mile of flat ground in this parish, and she cannot help herself. The young woman came in without asking and put the stone jar on the corn bin. That is for her legs. It is arnica and comfrey, and it is mostly hog's lard, and it does actually work, whatever Bartle tells you. He says it is a female nonsense, and he uses it on his own dog. Ned straightened up slowly. Thank you, miss. Thank you. You brought 4 horses 4 days through that weather and got them here sound, which is more than the last man who brought us horses managed, and my father will not say a word about it, so I shall. She looked past him at the mare's off hind. Her name is what? Juno. Juno. She reached up and let the mare smell her, and put her hand flat on the neck, and the mare dropped her head about 6 inches, which is a thing horses do not do for everybody. You are all right. Then, Juno, nobody here is going to ask you to be interesting. She went out. Ned Gaunt stood in the box with a jar of hog's lard and arnica in his hand, and found that he wanted, with quite startling urgency, to know her name. He asked Bartle that evening. That'll be Miss Verity, Bartle said. Middle one. She's the one that runs it. runs what? Or house, farm. Sir Ambrose's dinners, his letters, his lambing, the lot. Bartle spat expertly into the drain. Their mother went in 1811, and the eldest wouldn't, and the youngest couldn't. So it come to her, and it's been her ever since. 23-year-old, and she does the tithe accounts. Don't get thanked for it, neither. Is she out? Out. She's never been to London in her life. There's no money spent on her. Bartle picked up a hoof pick. There's a deal of money spent in that house. Mind, just not on her. Ned learned Thornfield from underneath, which is the only way anybody ever learns a house. He learned it in the kitchen at 6 in the morning, and in the loft at 10 at night, and in the yard all the hours between. And what he learned in 7 days would have taken a guest in the blue bedroom 7 years. He learned that Sir Ambrose Kytely paid a shilling a week below the county rate, and considered it a service to the character of the young. He learned that a housemaid named Sally Pruitt had been dismissed on the Tuesday for breaking a dish, without a character, at 19, 4 miles from a village where her mother was bedridden, and that on the Wednesday she was back and nobody spoke of it, because Miss Verity had gone up to her father's study and stayed there 20 minutes, and come out, and the girl was reinstated, and the cost of the dish, 11 shillings and 6 pence, had come out of Miss Verity's own pin money, which was £14 a year, and Mrs. Dade the housekeeper knew it because Miss Verity had asked her not to say. He learned that Cassandra Kytely rode superbly, spoke 3 languages, kept the accounts of nothing, and had a temper that went through the servants' hall like weather. He learned that Louisa Kytely was, in the phrase of a scullery maid of 16 who did not know he could hear her, lovely as an angel to anybody who might tell. And on the 4th night he learned the rest of it, in the straw with a dying horse. Samson was 22 years old and had been one of Lady Kytely's carriage pair. He had collected twice that summer and gone down at 6 in the evening on the 8th of September, and by 9 it was clear to everybody in the yard which way it was going. Sir Ambrose came down at 9:30 in his evening clothes with a napkin still in his hand, looked at the horse for 11 seconds, and said, "Shoot him tonight, Bartle. I'll not feed him through another winter to do this again in the spring," and went back into his port. Bartle went to fetch the pistol. And Verity Kytely came down the yard in the dark in a shawl over her dinner dress, and stood in the doorway of the box and said, "No, Miss, not tonight. He is not in distress now. Look at him. He is quiet. If he is in distress at any hour of the night, you will do it, and I shall hold him. But you will not shoot a horse in the dark, because my father wants to finish his port." Her voice was not raised. It was extremely level, and it did not move at all. "He carried my mother for 9 years. Bartle, he is not being shot on a Sunday because he is inconvenient." Bartle looked at her for a moment. "No, miss," he said, and went away, and did not come back. She sat down in the straw. She sat down in the straw in her dinner dress with her back against the wall and the old horse's head across her lap, and she was still there at 11, and at 1, and at 3. Ned Gaunt sat with her. She did not ask him to, and she did not ask him to leave. He had come in at 11 with 2 blankets and a lantern turned low and a can of warm water, and she had said, "Thank you, Reeve," and he had sat down on the corn bin, and after 20 minutes he had got down into the straw as well, at the other end of the horse, and rubbed the animal's ears, which is the one thing you can do for them. At about 1 o'clock, in the dark, she began to talk. "He is not a monster. My father," she said, "I want that understood. He is a man who was hungry until he was 40, and he has never once been able to believe the food will still be there in the morning. Everything he does is that. Every shilling he shaves off a wage. Every dish he charges for. He cannot help it. He can help some of it, Miss. Yes. She was quiet a moment. Yes, he can. That was disloyal of me and true, and I shall be sorry for it tomorrow. The horse breathed. The lantern hissed. May I ask you something, Reeve? And will you answer it honestly, as a favor, since you are the only person on this estate who has no reason to lie to me? Ned Gaunt, sitting in the straw under a false name, said, I will answer what I can, miss. Is he a decent man, your Duke? Ned rubbed the horse's ear. I don't know how to answer that, miss. You have been his groom how long? 11 years one way and another. Then you know exactly how to answer it, and you are being careful, which is a very good sign in a servant and no use to me at all. She shifted and settled the horse's head. I shall tell you why I ask. Do you know why he is coming here? To pay his respects. I understood. He is coming to choose which of us he will marry. Ned said nothing. There is an article, Verity said. My father lent the late Duke £60,000 in 1809 and took a marriage in payment. One of us, chosen by him, before Michaelmas, or the whole sum falls due, which would be the end of Marchford. I have read it. I read it 3 years ago in my father's desk, and I have never told my sisters, and I never shall. Why not? Because Cassandra would be unbearable and Louisa would be worse. She said it without heat, and because it would not help either of them to know that the thing they have been dressing for since June is not a courtship. It is a delivery. The lantern flickered. Samson's flank rose and fell. They think he is coming to fall in love, Verity said. Cassandra has had 11 gowns made. Louisa has learnt 2 new songs and a great deal about the long gallery at Marchford. And he is coming here because a piece of paper signed when he was a boy says he must, and he will look at the 3 of us for an afternoon and pick one, and then he will take her away, and she will be a duchess, and nobody will ever ask her a single question about it again for the rest of her life. She looked up. In the lantern light, her face was quiet and entirely serious. I feel very sorry for him, she said. Ned Gaunt's hand had stopped moving on the horse's ear. For him, miss. He was 19. His father signed it while he was in Portugal. I know that because the article recites it. She laughed a little, without much in it. Everybody in this county has spent the summer talking about which of the Kytely girls will be sold to the Duke of Marchford. Not one person has said out loud that the Duke of Marchford was sold first, by his own father, at 19, and has had to wait 7 years to find out who he was sold to. Nobody talks about that, because he is a duke. And dukes are not supposed to be things that happen to people. There was a long silence in the box. He may be perfectly horrible, Verity said. He may be exactly what Cassandra deserves, and she may be exactly what he deserves, and they may be very happy hating each other in 131 feet of gallery. I only wish somebody had asked him. Ned Gaunt sat in the straw in a stable in Suffolk at 2 in the morning and discovered that he was having difficulty with his own throat. And you, miss, he said, if he chose you? He will not choose me. She said it the way you say the sun rises in the east. Reeve, I want you to look at me and understand that I am not being modest, because modesty is a performance, and I have not the energy for it. Cassandra is beautiful and Louisa is charming, and I am the one who does the accounts. A man has one afternoon in a drawing room. He will choose one of the first 2, and he will be right too, because with one afternoon that is all the information there is. And if he had a week... Nobody has a week, said Verity Kytely. At 4 in the morning, the old horse got his legs under him and stood up, shakily, and passed a great deal of wind, and looked round at both of them with the profound indignation of an animal who has been made a fuss of unnecessarily. Verity Kytely started to laugh and could not stop, sitting in the straw in a ruined dinner dress with her hair down, and Ned Gaunt laughed with her, and for 11 seconds there was nothing in that stable but two people who were very tired and very glad. Then she got up and picked the straw off her skirt and said, "Thank you, Reeve. I would have had to sit here alone and I should have hated it," and went up to the house as it was getting light. Ned stayed and did the horses water. He had 6 days left of his week, and he had already stopped kneading them. Lord Finn arrived on the 11th of September at 11 in the morning, one day early for the Duke of Marchford's visit, having ridden over from Halesworth to be sure of his welcome. Charles Finn was 34, had commanded a squadron of the 11th Light Dragoons at Waterloo, had 400 a year and no sense whatsoever, and was, by a considerable distance, the best-natured man in the county. He came into the stable-yard because he always came into the stable-yard, being that sort of man, and he was in the middle of handing his horse to Dickon when he stopped dead. "Good God," he said, "Marchford." The whole yard heard it, Bartle heard it, 2 grooms and a boy heard it, and Cassandra and Louisa Kytely, who had come down expressly because Lord Finn was expected and Lord Finn talked, heard it from 11 feet away under the arch. Ned Gaunt was standing in his shirt sleeves with a hoof-pick in his hand and a bay gelding's leg between his knees. He put the foot down. "Finn," he said, "what in the name of everything holy are you doing holding that animal? Working? You are a duke?" "I am also," said Ned, "quite good with horses, which is more than can be said of you at Ganapa, where you rode into a ditch in front of 200 men." There was a silence in that yard of a quality Ned had only previously encountered under artillery. Then Cassandra Kytely said, in a voice with nothing at all left in it, "You are the Duke of Marchford?" Ned Gaunt straightened and wiped his hands on a rag and turned round and became, in the space of about 2 seconds and without moving very much, an entirely different man. It was not a trick. It was simply that he stopped keeping something out of his shoulders. "I am," he said, "Miss Kytely. I owe you an apology, and I shall make it properly, indoors, to your father in the next quarter of an hour, and I shall not attempt to make it now in a yard." Louisa Kytely had gone the color of paper. She had been running the last 6 days through her head at very great speed, and she had arrived. Ned could see that Dickon in the buckets. "Reeve," Cassandra said, "you told my sister your name was Reeve." "It was my mother's name." "You let me speak to you." "You did not speak to me, madam," said the Duke of Marchford. "That is rather the point." The next quarter of an hour in Sir Ambrose Kytely's library was one of the most remarkable performances Ned ever witnessed. Sir Ambrose was told the truth in 11 sentences that his guest had arrived a week early in the character of his own groom, that he had done it deliberately, and that he had done it because the article gave him a choice he did not think a single afternoon was adequate to make. Sir Ambrose Kytely went in 90 seconds through fury, humiliation, calculation, and out the other side into an enormous, glittering, wholly commercial delight. "You are a deep one," he said. By God, sir, a week in my own stable?" He struck the desk. "And which of them? Then which of my girls?" "Sir Ambrose." No, you shall have your reasons. You shall have your reasons, Cassandra. Is it she rides? You'll not find a better seat in the eastern counties." "Sir Ambrose, I am not going to do this in front of you today." Quite right. Ceremony." Sir Ambrose was already at the bell. "Mrs. Dade." The best rooms opened and sent to Halesworth for... "I should like to see Miss Verity," said Ned. Sir Ambrose stopped with his hand on the cord. "Verity?" he said. "Yes." And then something happened in that room that Ned had not expected and never forgot. Ambrose Kytely's face did not light up. It went for a moment, oddly still and then wary and then unmistakably uncomfortable. Verity does the accounts, he said. I know. She has not been out. She has not been got up for it. Your Grace, do you follow me? There was no occasion to. He stopped. He put the bell cord down. Her mother would have seen to it, he said, in an entirely different voice. I did not. He found her in the still room at 4 o'clock with her sleeves rolled up, making the arnica. She did not turn round when he came in. She said, Cassandra has taken to her bed and Louisa has been crying in the morning room for 2 hours and Mrs. Dade tells me the Duke of Marchford has been in this house for 6 days holding my horses. 7? Verity Kytely put down the pestle. Then she turned round, and Ned Gaunt discovered that he had been entirely wrong about one thing. She was not incapable of anger. She was extremely capable of it. She had simply had no occasion in 23 years to spend any. Get out, she said. Miss Kytely. You sat in the straw? Her voice cracked, and she got it back under control with an effort that was terrible to watch. You sat in the straw at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you let me tell you about my mother's horse. You let me tell you that I felt sorry for you. I said it to your face, and you rubbed a horse's ears and let me say it. Yes. You let me tell you I would not be chosen, and why. You let me lay out my own 2 sisters for you like linen, and you let me, and the entire time you were doing arithmetic. She was shaking. I have spent 5 years in this house being the one who knows things nobody says out loud. I have never once, in my life, been on the other side of it, and you did it in a week. Yes, Ned said. That is exactly what I did, and I will not pretend it was anything else. Why? Because I could not think of another way to find out who any of you were, and because he stopped. This was the part he had not prepared. Because I was a coward about it, and because I have been looked at as the Duke of Marchford for 16 months, and I wanted 1 week where nobody in the room was performing at me. I told myself it was for your sakes. 2 days in, I knew it was for mine. Verity stood with her hands on the edge of the table. Say the rest of it, she said. The rest of it is that I choose you, said the Duke of Marchford, and that I have chosen you since the 4th night, and that I have spent 3 days trying to find a way of telling you that does not make it the worst thing anybody has ever said to you. It is the worst thing anybody has ever said to me. Yes, Ned said, I know. And Verity Kytely said, no. She said it standing perfectly still in a still room smelling of comfrey, with her sleeves rolled up. No, understand me, I am not being modest, and I am not fishing, and I am not punishing you. Though God knows you have earned some, I am saying no. Will you tell me why? Because you did not choose me, she said. You chose the woman who did not know she was being watched. That is not the same person. That woman sat in the straw and said true things because there was no cost to saying them. Because you were a groom and grooms do not matter. And that is a horrible sentence. And it is how everybody in this house has lived their whole lives. And I am no better than the rest of them. Her chin came up. You have not chosen a woman. You have chosen the results of a test. And I will not spend the next 40 years married to a man who is quietly grateful that I passed it. There was a very long silence in the still room. That, said Ned Gaunt eventually, is the single best argument I have heard in 11 years. And I served under Wellington? Do not be charming at me. No, he put his hands behind his back. Then may I ask for something else instead? What? I have 5 weeks and 4 days until Michaelmas. Let me stay at Thornfield as myself. Not in the stable, in the blue bedroom, with a valet and a card tray and every appalling thing that goes with it. Let your sisters do their worst at me, and let your father count the silver in front of me. And you may look at me for 5 weeks with your eyes open, knowing exactly what I am, and at the end of it you may still say no, and if you do, I shall marry nobody. And the 60,000 pounds may fall due, and Marchford may go, and I will not blame you for 1 hour of 1 day of the rest of my life. Verity Kytely stared at him. That is an appalling thing to say to somebody. Yes, I have thought about it a great deal, and I cannot find a way to make the offer without the 60,000 pounds being in the room, so I have put it in the room where you can see it. He met her eyes. Say no in 5 weeks and I will go, and it will cost me everything, and that is my debt and my father's, not yours. I will not have you marry me to save a house. Then what would you have me marry you for? Nothing yet, said the Duke of Marchford. That is the point of the 5 weeks. The 5 weeks were a war, and Verity Kytely spent them entirely alone in the middle of it. Cassandra recovered on the 2nd day and came downstairs transformed. She was magnificent. She was gracious. She made not one single reference to the stable yard, and she rode out with him 3 times a week and was better company on a horse than anybody Ned had met in years, and he told her so, and meant it, and she understood in about 4 days that it was going to be no use whatsoever, and she never forgave any of them. Louisa's campaign was subtler and much worse. Louisa had understood that her mistake was the boot boy, and so Louisa became, over 5 weeks, extraordinarily kind to the servants, ostentatiously kind at the top of her lovely voice in the hall where it could be heard. Ned watched her give Dickon a shilling in front of 4 people, and watched Dickon take it, and watched the Dickon's face, and said nothing. And on the 29th of September, 6 days before Michaelmas, Cassandra Kytely destroyed her sister at the Fenn's harvest dinner in front of 31 people. She did it with the truth, which is why it worked. Poor Verity is very tired, she said, to a table which had just been wondering aloud why the Duke of Marchford had spent 5 weeks at Thornfield without an announcement. She keeps such dreadful hours. She was up the whole of one night in September in the stable the whole night, from 10 until it was light, with only the groom for company. Papa's man Bartle will tell you. It is her great kindness, of course. She is quite fearless about that sort of thing. She let it sit for exactly as long as it needed. His Grace's groom, she added, the one who has since left us. The table was very quiet, and Verity Kytely sat at that table and understood, with total clarity, the shape of the trap. There was no answer. If she said nothing, she was a young woman who had spent a night in a stable with a servant. If she said the groom was the Duke, she was a young woman claiming a Duke had spent 7 days in her father's stable in disguise and had spent 1 night in the straw with her, which was madder and worse, and which she would be saying in a room where the Duke was sitting 11 feet away. And if the Duke confirmed it, and she knew he would stand up and say it in that flat carrying voice and never count the cost, then he would be a Duke who had lied to a whole county for a week, and it would be the funniest story in Suffolk for 10 years, and he would deserve none of it. Verity Kytely put down her fork. I sat with a dying horse, she said, my mother's carriage horse, who was 22 years old, and who my father had ordered shot at 9:30 at night in the middle of his dinner. He got up at 4 in the morning, and he is alive now and out in the low paddock, and if any of you would like to come and look at him, he is a bay with 3 white feet, and his name is Samson. She picked her fork back up. Somebody was kind enough to sit with me, she said. I do not propose to be ashamed of it in order to make the rest of this evening more comfortable. It was not enough. She knew it was not enough while she was saying it. 31 people heard a young woman decline to deny something, and by Tuesday it was in 4 villages, and by Thursday there was a version in which she had been found, and by Friday Sir Ambrose Kytely came out of his study grey in the face because a man in Halesworth had made a joke to him in a bank. Ned Gaunt did not stand up at that table because Verity, without ever looking at him, had put her hand flat on the cloth in a way he had learnt in 5 weeks to read, and it meant, do not. He waited 3 days. On the 2nd of October, the stables at Thornfield caught fire at 11:30 at night. It began in the hay store at the far end, which was Bartle's fault and which Bartle knew for the remaining 9 years of his life, because he had let a lad take a lantern in there at 9 o'clock and had not checked the hook. By the time the bell went, the roof of the store was gone and the wind was out of the west and running the length of a brick building with 40 loose boxes in it. Ned came out of the house at a dead run in his shirt and got there in time to see Verity Kytely go in. She went in through the near end, where there was no fire yet, only smoke, in a nightgown and a cloak and her father's old boots, and she went in because there were 9 horses in that end, and Dickon was 11 years old and could not get more than one at a time. Ned Gaunt went in after her. What followed took 22 minutes, and neither of them ever afterwards had a clear account of it. There was smoke at the height of a man's chest so that you worked bent double. There was the noise, which was the part that stayed with him, 40 horses in brick boxes, which is a sound that does not go out of you. There was Bartle at the far end with a wet sack. There was Sir Ambrose Kytely, 58 years old, in his nightshirt, hauling on a head collar with both hands and swearing in the language of the Wapping rope walk where he had been born. They got out 31 of them. Verity Kytely got 11 of those on her own, and she did it by putting her cloak over their heads, which somebody had taught her when she was 9 and which she had never had cause to use. And on the last one, which was Juno the Grey, the mare would not come, and Verity went into the box after her and got a hand on the halter as the roof over the next box down came in. Ned reached in and got a fistful of the back of her cloak and pulled, and the mare came with them, and the 3 of them went out into the yard in a rush of sparks, and Verity Kytely fell over in the mud with her hands open and the palms burnt raw from a bolt she had pulled that was hotter than she had understood. They lost 9 horses. It could have been 40. At 2 in the morning, she was sitting on a mounting block in the yard with her hands in a bucket of cold water, and Ned Gaunt was kneeling in the mud in front of her, holding her wrists under the surface because she kept trying to take them out. Leave them in. There are people to see to. There are 11 people seeing to them, and they are all better at it than you. Leave your hands in the water. Sir Ambrose Kytely came across the yard. He was black to the elbows. His nightshirt was ruined, and there was a burn across the back of his own left hand that he had not mentioned to anybody. He stopped in front of his middle daughter and stood there. "You went in," he said. "Yes, Papa." Cassandra was at the pump. Louisa was on the terrace. He said it not as an accusation, but as a man reading out a total. "You went in first, and you went in furthest, and you went in for a horse I ordered shot in September." Samson was in the low paddock, Papa. He was never in any danger. "I know where he was," said Sir Ambrose Kytely, and his voice went, and he put the back of his burnt hand against his mouth for a second. Then he said, "Your mother would have gone in?" "Yes." "I have not looked at you since 1811, he said, "not properly, not once. I have had you doing the tithe accounts at 23, and I have never taken you to London, and I have never had a gown made for you that was not made out of Cassandra's, and I did not know until Marchford said your name in my own library that I had one daughter in this house I had not troubled to look at." He turned and walked away across the yard, because he was not a man who could have stayed for the rest of it, and at the arch he stopped and said, without turning round, "There is nothing wrong with the accounts. There never has been. I checked them, and there is never anything wrong with them," and went into the house. It was the closest Ambrose Kytely ever came, and everybody involved understood that it was a great deal further than he had ever gone before. Verity sat on the mounting block with her hands in the water. "I am going to cry," she said, "and it is not about my hands, and I would rather you did not watch." Ned Gaunt let go of her wrists and stood up and turned round and stood with his back to her, looking out at what was left of the stable roof, and stayed there for 4 minutes while she cried and did not say one word. When she had stopped, he said, still with his back turned, "May I tell you something now, or would you rather I did not?" "Tell me." "I did not come to Thornfield to judge you," Ned said. "That is what I said in the still room, and it was not true, and it has taken me 5 weeks to work out what the true thing was. I was 19 when my father sold me. In 11 years, nobody has once asked me what I wanted, not the army, not my father, not the solicitors, not the article, not one single person. And when I read that thing in Lincoln's Inn, I understood that I was going to have to walk into a drawing room and do to some woman exactly what had been done to me. Look at her for an afternoon, choose her out of a line, take her away for the rest of her life on an hour's information. And I could not do it, so I told myself I would go and be a groom for a week and gather better information, and that this was clever, and that it was for the girls' sakes." He stopped. "It was not information I went for. I went because I have been an object since I was 19, and I wanted 7 days of being nobody. And I got it. And on the 4th night of it, a woman I had no business talking to sat in the straw and told me she felt sorry for the Duke of Marchford. You were the first person in my life to say that out loud, and I could not tell you who I was, because the moment I told you, you would have stopped." Verity Kytely said nothing. "That is the whole of it," Ned said. "I did not choose you because you passed. I chose you because for one night I was not a duke, and you were kind to me anyway. And it turned out that being treated like a man instead of a title is the only thing I have ever actually wanted, and I had got to 32 years of age without knowing it." The yard was quiet. Somewhere down the far end, a horse called and another answered. "Turn round," said Verity. He turned around. "You may say the thing about the 5 weeks now," she said. "The proper version." "Verity Kytely, will you marry me?" "No," said Verity, "not for 6 days." "I beg your—" "Michaelmas is the 6th. You will not have my answer until after it." She took her hands out of the bucket and looked at them and put them back in. "I have spent 5 weeks watching you, and I know exactly what I think of you. And I am not going to say it while there is £60,000 sitting in the room, because you were right to put it there, and it is still there, so we will let it fall due. And then I shall answer." Ned Gaunt stared at her. "That will ruin me." "Yes," said Verity Kytely. Michaelmas fell on a Sunday. The article expired at midnight on the 5th of October, 1816, and the £60,000 became payable within 90 days, and the Duke of Marchford spent the day in the burnt-out end of the Thornfield stables with 3 men and a cart, clearing charred timber, because he could not think of anything else to do with himself. Verity Kytely spent it in her father's study with the door shut. She came out at 6 in the evening with 2 papers in her bandaged hands and asked Mrs. Dade to send to the stables for his grace, and to ask her father to come to the library and to have the fire lit, because it was going to take some time. The debt was discharged in 1811, she said. Ambrose Kytely put his glass down. "Verity, In March of 1811, the trustees of the 6th Duke of Marchford sold the Ardley property in Essex for £58,000 and remitted the whole of it to you against the loan. And you receipted it, and the receipt is in the third drawer of that desk, in a bundle tied with green tape. And I have had it in my hands twice, once 3 years ago, when I did not understand what I was looking at, and once this afternoon when I did. Sir Ambrose Kytely's face had gone the color of tallow. The loan was 60,000, Verity said. The remittance was 58. You have been owed £2,000 since 1811. Papa, not 60. And you have let the article stand for 5 years. And you have let a man come into this house to be married for a debt that had been paid, because what you wanted was never the money. It was a title, Ambrose Kytely said. He said it with his hands flat on the desk and his head down, and it came out of him like something being pulled. It was a title. 31 years I have been in this county, and I have bought 1,100 acres, and I have built that stable, and I have given £400 to the church, and there is not a family within 20 miles that has ever asked me to dine except to borrow. My girls were to have what I could not. And there was a paper in my desk that said a duke had to take one of them. He looked up, and I would have done it. God forgive me, Verity. I would have let him marry Cassandra on Tuesday and never said a word. The library was very quiet. The Duke of Marchford was standing by the window in a coat with charcoal on the sleeve, holding a piece of paper he had been handed 4 minutes ago and had read 3 times. You have just given me £60,000, he said. I have given you the truth, said Verity Kytely. The 2,000 you do owe him, and I imagine you will pay it. You understand what you have done? His voice was not entirely steady. There is no article, there is no Michaelmas. There is nothing at all requiring me to marry any daughter of this house, and I am free as of the moment you opened your mouth. And you knew that before you came out of that room? Yes. You could have said nothing. You could have let me be ruined and married me out of pity, or let me be ruined and refused me, or married me first and told me afterwards, and I would never have known. Yes. Why? Verity Kytely stood in the middle of her father's library with her bandaged hands at her sides. Because I was not going to be chosen out of a line, she said, and I was not going to be chosen because I passed a test, and I was not going to be chosen because you had no other choice. So I've taken all of it off the table, everything. There is no debt, no article, no ruin, no obligation, and no reason on this earth for you to be standing in this room. She lifted her chin. You may go to London tomorrow and marry an earl's daughter with £30,000, and everybody will say it is the sensible thing, and it will be. So now I know that if you stay, you have stayed. The Duke of Marchford put the paper down on the desk. He walked across the library, and he stopped in front of her, and he did not touch her hands, because they were burnt. Verity, he said, will you marry me? Yes, she said. They were married on the 22nd of November, 1816, in the parish church at Thornfield, which was small and cold, and had 11 Kytely servants in the back, 4 pews at the express and immovable instruction of the bride. Dickon held the horses. He was given no shilling for it in front of anybody, and a place as second groom afterwards where nobody could see, and he stayed at Marchford 41 years and ended as head coachman. Cassandra Kytely married Lord Finn in the following June, which surprised absolutely everybody, including both of them. It was not a great match, and she did not become a duchess, and she was, in the end, and to her own considerable irritation, extremely happy, because Charles Finn had no sense whatsoever and thought she was the most magnificent creature in England and told her so daily for 30 years. She and Verity were never close. They were, eventually, something better than close. They were two women who wrote to each other every week for 40 years about horses. Louisa Kytely married a wealthy clergyman of 44 and became a considerable figure in the county for her charitable works, and was beloved by every person of consequence who ever met her, and was never once, in her whole life, spoken well of by a servant. Sir Ambrose Kytely paid £2,000 to the Marchford estate in the January and had the receipt framed. He came to Marchford every Christmas for 11 years. He never entirely stopped shaving shillings off wages, and Verity never entirely stopped catching him at it, and their correspondence on the subject, which survives, is one of the great comic exchanges of the period. Samson died in the low paddock at Thornfield in the spring of 1819 at the age of 25, in the sun, having been fed by hand every day for 2.5 years by a knight of the realm who told everybody it was the girl who insisted. The stables at Thornfield were rebuilt in brick, with the hay store 200 feet from the boxes, which Bartle superintended personally and which he checked twice every night of the 9 years remaining to him. They lived at Marchford. The long gallery was 131 feet, and Verity Gaunt, Duchess of Marchford, filled 31 of them with the estate's accounts, because she had no intention of stopping, and nobody was foolish enough to suggest it. And once or twice a year on a bad morning, or the anniversary of nothing, or when he came in from the yard with his sleeves rolled and mud to the knee, and 40 years of dukedom sitting on him like a wet coat, she would come down to the stable and put a jar of arnica and comfrey on the corn bin and say, "Thank you, Reeve." And he would put the foot down and straighten up and be, for about 4 seconds, entirely nobody at all. Which is, in the end, the only thing he had ever wanted. Thank you for listening to this historical romance. If the moment Verity chose to hand him the truth and set him free, knowing it might cost her everything, gave you chills, then you and I want the same things out of a story. There is nothing better than a woman who refuses to be the answer to somebody else's test. If you enjoyed the slow burn between Verity and the Duke, and Samson getting to his feet at 4 in the morning, please give this video a like. It genuinely helps the channel. Share it with anyone who loves a hero who would rather be nobody and a heroine who does the accounts. And do subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new audio drama as we go deeper into Regency romance, marriages of convenience, disguised aristocrats, and quiet women who turn out to be the strongest person in the house. Tell me in the comments, would you have said yes at Michaelmas or waited the 6 days?